This is for a college talk that I did this, so I have to change it a little bit. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about marriage. Come on in, Laura. No, where are you going? That's not coming in. Sam is waiting for you. All right. So I wanted to talk quickly about marriage. This is actually a talk I put together for some of the college students, and they really liked it, so I thought maybe it would work for the adults. But we want to talk about this idea of marriage and what it is and the importance of it, and whether or not it's just a piece of paper. I guess I'll skip to the punchline. The way we view ourselves and the way we view sort of our outside appearances and the way we manage things and our personas. Book, you need glasses. You can't see jack. You're just squinting. Up. All right. It says, so what I do is I normally put up a few slides, and I put up some slides like, the kind of slides we put up on Facebook, right? Things for your kids, athletic events, whatever, Thanksgiving, things like this, happy family, blah, blah, blah. And, it does this. I'm just going to have to. All right, sorry, I'm just going to have to do something else. Okay, sorry, the computer, for some reason, it doesn't support PowerPoint. I don't know why. Okay. So the way we have to view ourselves, and the way we sort of manage our outside appearances, and the way we manage our internal feelings, right? So sometimes we like to put on this appearance of being, successful and happy, and this is the appearance that we bring when we come to church. This is the appearance we put on for people and friends and neighbors. And we don't like to fight in front of our friends and in front of Abuna, in front of our family. But then we have to look at inside and what's going on inside, right? And this is the feeling that we have inside, right? It has to be this feeling, right? We have to have this feeling of being a beggar, of being broken, of being weak, of being in need of help. And this is ultimately what marriage is about, right? It's about this internal feeling of being a beggar, of being broken, of needing somebody else. So most marriage talks work like this. I give you some scary statistics about divorce. Then I tell you Christianity doesn't allow divorce. And I say, so if you're Christian, you don't get divorced, and we're better than 75% of people out there, right? And we all feel good about ourselves. But today I want to take a slightly different path. And I want to talk about marriage as the path of salvation, the way God instituted it. God didn't make it as a social thing. He made it as a path of salvation. And sometimes I think we get a little bit, we hear so many stories about monks that we tend to think that monasticism is sort of an approach. And we have to realize that monastics are 0.5%, if that. Right? The path that God created for most of mankind, when I say most, I mean 99.5%, is marriage. Right? God instituted marriage. This is part of His plan, and this is how we attain salvation. So it's not an optional thing, I almost want to say. It's a necessary part, except for very few special people who have chosen a different path, and there's very few of them. Other than those few people, marriage is how we attain salvation. And I want to talk about this here in a little bit. Well, you can't read a thing. So what is the essence of marriage? So do we need a piece of paper to prove I love you? And the answer is obviously not, right? So here's the thing. The Christian view of marriage is a long-term relationship with a friend, and it changes you, and it makes you into something different, right? Unfortunately, the consumer relationship or the consumer view of dating is that, a lot of people, when we're dating, we kind of put on our best image, right? We chew with our mouth closed, and we don't fart in public, and we do things like this, right? When we're dating, because it just doesn't work very well to do those other things, right? And depends, but once you're past dating, you enter into marriage. okay? And then marriage becomes a more intimate thing. And the reason it's more intimate is because I get to open myself up to somebody and not have to cover who I am like we did when we were dating, right? When we were just getting to know people, when I had to pretend I was somebody else so that, the parents or the spouse or the future, whoever could, now I can let myself go. Now I can be really who I am. And this is the intimacy of marriage. So the point of marriage is it allows me to open up and say, this is who I am. This is what I am. I'm that beggar that you saw on that first slide. I'm a broken person, right? I have all kinds of weaknesses. I have all kinds of fears. I cry for no apparent reason. I have a really big ego. I have pride in my life. I have these things, right? And these are all things we all have, okay? And the intimacy of marriage and the beauty of what God created was that we're allowed to be that person with each other, and that person loves and accepts us anyway. And when I think about marriage, a lot of times you look at these, these dating websites and things like this, and you think about Match.com and some of these other dating websites. What are they doing? Well, they basically say fill in a questionnaire, fill in 80 questions about yourself. What do you like to do? What do you like to eat? Do you like to travel? Everyone says, I like to travel, right? And then you put in your wish list of all these things, right? And then Match.com, using its secret algorithm, matches you with somebody else, okay? Think about what that's really saying. What are you really saying when you sign up for a website like that? Right. I'm completely selfish. Here's what I like to do, and I need to find someone who likes to do what I like to do because I don't want to change anything about me. Yeah, I'm just decoding it for you, but that wouldn't go very well in the advertising if that's what they said, but that's really what it is, right? And unfortunately, many people approach marriage and dating this way, right? This is what I want to do, right? And I want someone to do whatever I want to do, but I don't want to change for that other person, right? And unfortunately, that person doesn't exist on earth. That person, that one person that will, find all these matches and everything lines up perfectly, that just doesn't happen, right? Marriage, by its very nature, just by the way, even God, just to make sure that there's sacrifice, he just makes men and women think differently. And as we're learning in biology, we're even wired differently, right? So there's just no chance that two people will be the same. Right? Just in case you find two that happen to be, they're even biologic, everything about them is different, right? Why is that? Why did God make it so hard? Why couldn't he make us just all marry people who were the same as us, right? Well, that's kind of the point. That's kind of the point. There has to be an element of sacrifice in the marriage. All right, I'll go quickly because there's a lot to read. I know no one can read this quote. I read this quote, someone texted to me, a friend of mine from Seattle, Rochelle actually, and it's an amazing quote, and it opened my eyes to something that I had never even thought about. He says, the first part we kind of know, he says, a marriage that does not constantly crucify its own selfishness and self-sufficiency, which does not, quote, die to itself, that it may point beyond itself, is not a Christian marriage. So this is something I think we should all know, and I think we do know, right? A marriage which does not constantly crucify its own selfishness. That's kind of the point of marriage. It's a place where we crucify our selfishness, right? We have things that we want, ways we want things done, and then you get into this marriage relationship, and it just beats you down, right? And it starts when you get married with the really big, important things like, she squeezes the toothpaste in the middle, I like to squeeze it from the end, right? These are the big issues that people fight about in the beginning. And then it continues to move forward, right? And then once you kind of, knock out all those big issues, right, or some of these issues, then the kids come, right? And then they kind of finish you off, right? Any selfishness that's left in you. And this is what's going on, right? When we start as little babies are what? Very, very, very selfish, right? And when they don't get their way, they cry, right, when they don't get their way. And then they start to get some friends, right? And you see the friends, one kid takes it from another kid, and the kid just looks at him and goes, whack, it hits him right on the head, and then the moms rush in, no, Habibi, you're supposed to share, you give it to him for a turn, and then it starts to work, right? And then you get older friends as a teenager, right? You get friends who don't take your selfishness very well, and if you treat them badly, they walk away. And then you get a spouse who brings you even more out of your selfishness, and the children bring you even more out of your selfishness, right? And this is the point, right? We're working to crucify ourselves in every way, and this is very consistent with what the church is doing right now, right? What is fasting doing? We crucify our ego, we crucify ourselves, we crucify our desire, right? We look at a piece of, steak, and we think, I really want that, and I'm not going to have it, not because of anything, but I'm going to impose it on myself. Now, does marriage do that? Absolutely. Has there been a time where I see something and I say, this is something I really want to do, but she doesn't, so I'm not going to do it? And just impose on myself, crucify myself of that one small desire, right? Happens 1,000 times, a month in a marriage, right? This is what it's supposed to be doing for you. So, when we think of the vows and I do kind of like the vows that the white people take in their marriages, in sickness and in health and death and poverty and all of these things, right? And I like these vows because these vows are basically saying, I see you the way you are, right? You're wearing a tux, you're wearing a nice white dress, everybody's smiling, there's no food in your teeth, right? Everything is perfect right now, okay? But I know that that's not going to be the case, okay? And I accept you right now, seeing you in your glorious state, right? Looking better than you've ever looked before and than you'll ever look again, right? That, someone said that to me once, and I was like, stressed out at my wedding, and he said, everyone's seen you look worse. I was like, that's true. So anyway, what was I talking about? So, all right, but basically, what I've gotten there in the second bullet is, I will love you even when you suck, right? When you're sick and when you're broke and when you're in desperate need, right? I'll continue to love you. And then I'll continue to love you even when I see in you ugliness, right? Do we see ugliness in each other? Of course, right? It's very difficult to get to know someone over a year or 2 or 3 or 4 and not see ugliness, right? We start to see it, even with friends, right? We make big friends, we think these people are great, and then all of a sudden something happens, and you're like, that was a little selfish. That wasn't very thoughtful. That was a little self-centered. And we see ugliness. We see weakness. We see, fear and me, right? Well, we're going to see that in our spouse, right? And guess what? The spouse sees it in you as well, okay? And as we start to grow and love and learn with one another, we become Christ-like, right? Because Christ sees that in us, doesn't he? And he still loves us, right? So once I have that love of Christ, I see the weakness in the person, and I see that he's being selfish, and I see that she's being whatever, right? And I still love them, right? And this is what Christ did for us. And this is why, by the way, that you can't really understand marriage outside of Christianity. I mean, honestly, I've had friends who are atheists, and, she's talking to me like, what do I do? I want to make sure my marriage lasts and things like that. And I said, I really don't know how to help you. Like, honestly, it's because there's going to be a time when he doesn't like you, right? There's going to be a time when he's mad at you. There's going to be a time when he hates you, when he sees ugliness in you. And I don't know what you can possibly tell him now to keep him from leaving you at that time, right? Because you have to have marriage that is committed above and beyond the value of the person, right? If I just love this person because she's pretty and she's smart and she's fun and she's, well, there's going to be a day when she's not pretty and fun and smart and not spontaneous and not whatever. What do I do now? Or do I just walk away and say, yeah, it's not working out for me. It's not what I expected, right? Because my marriage isn't that. It's a covenant between me and my spouse and God. So the relationship is with God. It's not with that other person. All right. So here's the quote that I wanted to get to that I think is very, very important, that really changed the way I view things. He says, the real sin of marriage today is not adultery or lack of adjustment or mental cruelty. It is the idolization of the family itself, the refusal to understand marriage as directed toward the kingdom of God. So he's saying that people idolize marriage. They idolize the other person. They idolize the idea of marriage more than God. This is expressed in the sentiment that one would, quote, do anything for his family, even steal. And you hear guys say things like this: I would do anything for my family, even steal for my family. And as soon as you hear that, you realize that what? The family is above God. And as soon as the family moves above God, we have a problem. In fact, this dovetails nicely in today's sermon, right? Today's sermon was, anyone who loves wife or husband or mother or father or son or daughter above me does not deserve me, right? That's exactly what Christ said, right? So it has to be the case that the love of God supersedes the love of my family, right? And then he continues, the family here has ceased to be for the glory of God. It has ceased to be a sacrament into his presence. So he says it's not the lack of respect for the family, it is the idolization of the family that breaks the family, right? So what he's basically saying is people are looking toward the family and they're not looking toward Christ. They're looking towards each other. They're saying, you know what, and they want, to have, the Christmas card scene, and they want to be happy, and they want to have, the kids running around, and they want this thing, right? And it's not that they want God. It's that they want the thing, right? And the thing is dangerous because it's an image, right? And Satan uses it against us all the time, right? And if you want to see images, look at Facebook, and everyone's trying to go for the image, right? Everyone's posting stuff and, outposting everyone else, and I do the same thing, right? And it's what are we doing? We've lost the focus of the family. The focus of the family has to be on Christ, on attaining Christ. That's the goal, right? Anyone who loves wife or husband or mother or father more than me doesn't deserve me, right? So this point to me was just, mind-boggling that he would say that. But this is really what we do, right? And in fact, this is something we do in a lot of things in the church. Sometimes, you ask someone, what do you want from God? And they'll say, what do you mean? You say, well, what do you want from him? What would you get from him? He has everything. He has the power for everything, to give you anything. What would you ask for, right? And what's the answer? I don't want anything from God. What do I want? I don't want anything from Christ. What do I want? I want Christ, right? I want the thing. I want Christ himself, not what he can give me, okay? And a lot of times we approach Christianity as like, what are you going to give me? Are you going to give me a happy family? Are you going to give me good kids? Because I don't want my kids on drugs. So if I bring them to church, are you going to make sure that, and people get upset. Like a kid will start to go on drugs, and the dad will say, I served in this church for 20 years, and God didn't give me what I wanted, right? So what was the service in the church for 20 years? It wasn't I was seeking Christ. It was I wanted something from him. I wanted good kids. I wanted doctors. I wanted kids who, were married, had a good marriage, et cetera, right? So we have to be very careful that even in marriage, we don't want just, okay, I want God to give me a good marriage. No, I want Christ. Full stop. That's it, right? And what comes out of that, are these other things. Okay? So what is I can read it here. What is the purpose of marriage? Okay, so I'll just I'll step back and say one definition is deep character change through deep friendship. We're here to change our character. We're here to come into a marriage, and it makes us into better people, right? And we come in with a lot of flaws, and I just want to read them to you. We're fearful, and we're proud, and we're inflexible, and we're controlling, and we're unreliable, and we're impatient, we're perfectionists, we're critical, we coward that twists we're cowards, so we twist the truth to look good. These are all things we do, and these are our weaknesses, and this is the beggar that I showed you earlier. That's who we are on the inside. We come into marriage with all these things. We come into the church with all these things. And just like it's not okay, I love this sign. The church is not full of hypocrites. There are always room for more, right? And it saddens me when kids come up, like, teenagers, and they'll say, the people in church are hypocrites. Uncle such and such, I thought was such a good person. Turns out he's a total fraud. And my reaction is always, well, what'd you think he was? What do you think we all are? We're all a bunch of frauds, are we not? right? I mean, the church is full of hypocrites. I mean, that's why we're here, right? We didn't come to the church to be good. We came to the church to be fixed, right? To be healed. The church is a hospital, right? I imagine someone walking into a hospital, and going into a place where there's a bunch of people with, I don't know, a cold, right? And yelling at them saying, look how bad look how sick you people are. You people disgust me, right? Who does that? Well, they're in a hospital. That's what they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be sick, right? And you don't walk into a hospital and say, you know what, I feel great. I'm so healthy. I'm better than the rest of you, okay? But this is what we do when we walk into church. We walk into the hospital, and all we want to do at church is show everyone that we're not sick. And it doesn't make any sense, right? Isn't that what we all do? Show everyone how good we are, how we're not sick. But that's the whole point of the church. The whole point of the church is a place where sick, broken people come to be healed. And if you don't admit you're ever sick and you don't let the doctor examine you, you've got this tumor going on inside and nobody's seeing it and no one's fixing it, right? So this is sort of the point. And marriage is the same way. The point of marriage is we don't come into marriage saying, you're a horrible person. Attack the other person or despise their weaknesses or say, you disgust me. You've got such a big ego. You're so controlling. You think you're always right. And we attack that person, and the other person has to say, well, of course I am. Well, would you think you married? Something perfect, right? And what do you have? What we both have. Let's hold hands. Let's love each other. And let's go to heaven together, right? So sometimes we go into this mode where we're attacking the other person for their weaknesses, when instead we need to be holding them and saying, you and me, we're going to go to heaven together, and we're going to take our family with us. And this is not about me and you being who's better and who's worse. It's about me and you going and seeing Christ together. Right? So I like this perspective, and I wish we did it more. And we don't come to church to be good, right? Because there is no good, right? I mean, we all fall short of the glory of God, right? It's just a matter of effort, of trying to be better. So this slide worked a lot better when it wasn't when it was in PowerPoint. But I just kind of want to go through this point. This relationship between Christ and the church. I want you to think about the relationship first. Ignore the left side. Think about the right side. What does Christ do for us? He does several things for us. He protects us. He loves us. He dies for us. He supports us. He's compassionate to us. He's tender and merciful to us, and he provides for us. Okay? Now let's think about our relationship to Christ. What do we do for Christ? We love Christ. We respect Christ. We serve Christ. We obey Christ. So St. Paul comes in Ephesians, and he takes out the word Christ and church, and he swaps them with husband and wife. And he says that the church and Christ are like husband and wife, and that relationship has to remain consistent. So and sometimes I think we get a lot of these gender things where people say, men and women are equal, men and women are the same. Well, we're certainly same in the image of God, and we're same in the amount that God loves us. But are our roles the same? Probably not, right? And there have to be different roles in the church between the two. So let me start with the husbands. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one has ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body just as Christ does the church. However, each one of you must love his wife as he loves himself. Does anyone see a theme in St. Paul's commandment to the guys? So let's start with the men. What are men like? Are they sacrificing? Are they thoughtful? Are they selfless? Do they think of others? No, that's not men, right? Men are pigs, they're selfish, they're stubborn. That's the way men are, right? And if you look at what St. Paul says, he gives men the hardest possible commandment. He says, I want you to love someone else as much as you love yourself. And you can't imagine that because you have no idea how much I love myself. And he says, yeah, that much. And you're like, really? That much? As much as me? I mean, have you ever gone to a gym and see guys look at themselves in the mirror, right? So it's something, right? So this is So, and by the way, this is not a very difficult commandment for a woman. You know, women are naturally sacrificing and naturally selfless and naturally giving. It's actually much easier for them to do this commandment. But he doesn't give it to the women. He gives it to the man, right? Because that's what the men need to hear. Because that's the men's problem. They're the stubborn, selfish pig ones, right, who think about themselves. So he gives them the commandment and say, now I want you to love her as much as yourself. And he says it like 4 or 5 times, right? Protect, love, die for, support, compassionate, tender, merciful. These are not normal characteristics of man. Okay. Now let's go to the women. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, for which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands. Anyone see a theme? Okay, let's think about women. What are women like? Do they like to be told what to do? Do they like to be ordered around? Do they like to listen to a man who's usually dumber than they are? No, right? I mean, if you ever tell a woman, hey, I'm a man, obey me, that's like, no, you didn't, right? So this is just not natural for women, right? And so what does St. Paul do? He does the exact same thing that he did with the men, right? The one thing women really kind of have a thing with is being told what to do. And so then St. Paul goes and he says, submit to your husbands. And they're like, really? The dumb one? The man? You ever know how dumb this guy is, right? But that's exactly what St. Paul does. Why? Because that's what they need, right? In just the same way gave men kind of the hardest commandment he could possibly think of for the men. This is the hardest commandment he could possibly think of for the women. And I'll be honest with you, we come from an Arabic culture which is heavily influenced with Islam. And so I think a lot of us saw people or parents or just heard sort of an asymmetric view of this, right? Where the men's commandments are kind of shoved down the women's throats, but then the women's commandments are shoved down their throats, but the men's commandments are just kind of let to ride, right? And I think that's part of one of the things I hope we can kind of, now that we're out of an Islamic society where, you know, women are degraded, that we can kind of put both of those together, right? And the men can kind of step up to that role, because you see, these two feed each other. Love always feeds itself, right? When a woman sees a man who would protect, love, die for, support, compassionate, tender, merciful, provides for her, then she would obey him. And there is no way a man who would do all of these things for his wife could possibly tell her, hey, I'm the man, you listen to me, right? Someone who would die for his wife. And I'm not talking about like take a bullet, you know, in some heroic movement, right? No, but like die for on a day-to-day basis, on a very, like, you know, really you want me to go to the mall and stand there and look at dresses with you? It'll kill me, but I'll do it, right? So this is the kind of dying we're talking about, right? Not movie, you know, hero dying. This is, you know, the little deaths, right? The death by 1,000 bite type of death, right? So a husband who would be willing to do those things for his wife and die to himself for his wife, of course that wife will submit to him and obey him and love him and do whatever. And it feeds itself, right? But when one breaks and one says, listen, I'm the man, you know, this is what we're going to do, and then she says, okay, well, I'll show him, right? And then next thing you know, he's going to show her, and next thing you know, we've got a loop, right? A hate loop that's going, and it's not, it does feed itself in the wrong direction, right? Everyone's trying to outdo the other one in anger or resentment or whatever the case may be. So love feeds itself and hate feeds itself, and you have to start those loops, and it's very important that you do. Okay, so the last thing I'll say is the identification of marriage with happiness and the refusal to accept the cross in it. Sometimes we think God made marriage to make us happy. And as Abuna talked about today as well, that's not the point. The point, God doesn't want to just make us happy. God wants us to have joy. And he said, not like the world gives you joy, I give you a different kind of joy, right? But that joy is always in the cross. And the kids are coming in, but I'll say one last thing. I only imagine this right-hand thief right here and the joy he had even though he was being crucified, right? So at some level, this is what Christian marriage becomes. Sacrifice for the other person, and it's in that sacrifice that we find tremendous amount of joy. All right, so Not too many kids are coming in, so I'll just keep going just very slowly, not move too much. This is the last slide I'll talk about then. All this sounds very difficult to do. And as Abuna said today in the sermon, with men all things are possible. Well, with men all things are impossible, but with God all things are possible. And if you look at this icon, I love this icon. And you see Christ is carrying this man. Okay? And I hope that at some point in our lives, you don't see this icon and you think, he's carrying that guy. I hope you see yourself in that guy. I hope when you see that icon, you think, that's exactly what he did for me. Right? Christ has to carry us. So when just like the commandment he gave earlier, to love more than everything else, these things are very difficult to do. So how do you do all of these things in marriage? You have to rely on Christ. It's impossible otherwise. Right? To love somebody in that way can't be done. Right? It has to be a supernatural love. All right. Okay. I saw this quote last night. Nah, I'll skip it. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Seemed like a good idea. I saw it on Facebook, and I thought, I'll put that on the talk for tomorrow, but then, the mood changed. Any other questions, comments, any thoughts? Anything? Nothing? Okay. Glory be to God forever, amen. Let's stand up and pray real quick. Make us worthy to say with all thanksgiving, Our Father, who art in heaven.